All right. How about now? I don't think it matters for this crew, but we think it's good for the online. All right. If folks online can't hear me,
Send Julia a note.
make yourselves known. All right. Good morning, guys. Come on up and join us. So I'm Ben Healey. I graduated from this place and the management school 12 years ago. Happy to talk about that to the extent it's at all interesting. But from there, went to work for the Connecticut Green Bank, got to know this company, Posigen, got snookered into trying to help Posigen grow because I thought it was about the coolest thing I'd heard in terms of a for-profit company trying to figure out how to solve problems that matter for folks that have traditionally been excluded. I brought with me my colleagues, Dr. Susan Young, who runs community partnerships for us here in Connecticut and is amazing, and Kyle Wallace, who lives in Connecticut now and is our VP of Public Policy. And so agenda for the day is not to do an advertisement for Posigen. It's instead to talk a little bit about what the challenges are that we face in trying to serve a community that's traditionally been excluded from access to clean energy, why that matters or doesn't, whether we're successful or not, talk through a little bit of that, talk a little bit about authenticity and what it means to be a for-profit company trying to do this, and how that's received, and whether or not we collectively can believe it. And it's totally fine for everyone to be fully dubious and challenging to that premise, and I'd encourage it. And then for Kyle to talk a bit about the current policy environment we live in and why, whereas once Posigen was totally out in the wilderness, we now live in a world where we can be more successful and how state and federal policy play into that. With all of that, I encourage interruptions, questions, informality. I am at best a non-traditional CFO, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys this morning. So with that, having said, we're not going to do an ad for Posigen. We'll start with a not ad for Posigen, but at least a little framework of who and what we are, with the idea being, after we show this, we'll talk about what's real in this versus what's not. And you too, feel free to interrupt at any point as well. All right.
Utility, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity.
My bill was very high, so I wanted to reduce it.
I didn't like paying so much money on my electric bill.
I got my first bill, and it was ridiculous. It was like $340, right? And I was like, oh, well, I gotta do something about this.
So many families, they still have just a mindset that solar is only for a certain demographic. There's for rich people, or they're for the affluent. You have to have the big house, you have to have the perfect credit, you have to have a whole lot of money in the bank to go solar. And that is so not the case with Posigen.
I didn't have to worry about putting down any money. It's a monthly thing I can pay out.
We did our research. When we started with Posigen, it was excellent. Getting a bill for $12 from UI? Who's gonna beat that?
There is this program that will allow you to put on solar, and also the other big piece is the energy efficiency, and it really does lower your bill, not only your electric bill, but your heating bill.
A whole team came in and they put the door vent on to see where there's leaks. Then they changed all my light bulbs, they did weather stripping, they did the plugs, they did everything.
And when she told me your light bill is gonna be about $25 and the material is gonna be at $72, I figured that's about $100 for the entire bill. And I just got a bill for $25 this month. So it's a done deal situation.
I pay $12 a month now, as opposed to $320, $330.
I've paid $12.84. I've had a $13 bill plus my lease, and that's it.
But in the summertime, you're gonna make out like a bandit.
Every time it's a bright sunny day, I'm like, oh, all that energy. Like today, all that energy.
Talking to families and seeing the benefits, it's like you're giving back. I'm a helper. That's what I do.
Solar panels are the way to go. You can save money. It's good for the environment. It'll make a big impact on your household.
I would encourage everybody who owns a house to get solar system. It is so efficient, you can't go wrong with Posigen.
All right, so it's totally an ad. But the reason I wanted to start there, how do I? Oh, I just want to be able to move to. There we go. No. Thank you. Appreciate it. The reason why I show that is because your professor shared some of the scripts that folks wrote around how you would talk about this. And that script was not a Posigen script. It was from our partnership with the Connecticut Green Bank. So we're going to get to your scripts later in this class, those who submitted them or those that have been nominated for consideration, as it were. But I wanted to say this. I joined this company. I like to say to every investor I ever meet with my head and my heart. I joined it because I was working in clean energy, and it was very clear that the folks that we were designing financial products for were folks that had credit scores or incomes that met underwriting criteria that allowed them to have access. And Posigen, founded post-Katrina in New Orleans, popped up on our radar and said, we're thinking of coming to the Northeast. We don't require a minimum FICO score. We don't require a minimum income. And we size our solar in concert with doing energy efficiency, because not only are we trying to produce more clean energy, we're dealing with folks who live in generational homes, less well-maintained, older, sited next to highways, sited next to factories, in places where the clean energy on their roof is nice, but what's really going on is they live in homes that are not comfortable because they're drafty and cold or hot or whatever. They're unhealthy because your average air exchange is supposed to be 6,000 cubic feet per minute, and a bunch of the homes we go in and you can't even tell because there's huge holes going through. And so they're exposed to all the particulate matter, the asthma rates are higher, all the rest. And I thought to myself, as a good bleeding heart liberal who came back to school to learn how to use capital to make a difference, this is a company that's trying to do that. And at the same time, they're small and haven't reached scale. And so can the Green Bank help them first? And then after I got to know them, could I come work for a place that actually tries to live out those sets of values while operating within the ridiculous constraints and foolish norms of the society and economic system we live in, both policy and economics as drivers of all kinds of craziness, which I'll talk about for a few minutes today. So that's why I joined. So before we get into it, Susan, why'd you join?
Okay.
I'm not putting, you don't have to do your whole spiel, just an intro,
Okay,
just the
okay.
intro.
Hello, everyone. Oh, here we go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Susan Young, and I am the Community Impact Manager at Posigen. So to Ben's question, why did I join? Why could I not join? I mean, when I see, well, yeah, so I joined Posigen because, a little bit over? Okay, okay. So I joined Posigen because I believe in renewable energy, and it's something that I've looked into previously, but just could not afford. So when I heard about a program moving about, expanding renewable energy to other areas, that's primarily were underserved, I just jumped in both feet. And that's why I joined.
Kyle, how about you? Why'd you join?
Hopefully my mic's on. So Kyle Wallace, Vice President of Public Policy at Posigen. I joined because I first was interested in energy in college. In my undergrad work, I was looking into different energy related fields, oil exploration and development in the Niger Delta and the environmental harms that was causing to the whole region and kind of upending a lot of the cultural, in the cultural institutions of the region. And so that was one piece. Then I was learning about lithium in Bolivia and some of the extractive elements there. And so as I learned more and more about energy, I knew that was something that I wanted to go into coming out of school. And so I, over a decade ago, came into the renewable energy space, and have been just fascinated by energy policy, which can oftentimes be very dull, and for a long time has kind of been living in public utility commissions. And now it's really, I think it's one of the most exciting areas with just all of the electrification, the clean energy, the transition, the differences or the changes we have to make to our utility business models, regulation. It's just, there's a lot going on. And so I find it very fun and fascinating. And yeah, that's why. And then Posigen, I joined a year and a half ago, and it was really about the mission. I was sold. I wanted to help make that possible, and we'll talk about it later. But it's an area that a lot of states have not done a great job on to date, and we're starting to make some progress.
Thank you, Kyle. So then I know we've got the interactive both online and in person, but I can't see the online folks, and so I'll just ask for one or two comments. Why are you guys in this? Somebody tell me. Why are you in an EJ class? Why do you care? How does it relate to this potentially or not? What would you want to get out of today? Anybody? Please. And tell me your name.
Hi, I'm Carolyn. I'm in environmental health, and so a lot of what this class is about makes sense to me conceptually and academically, but I know nothing about finance. And so I feel that the experts being brought into this room can talk a lot about capital and finance and how that can complement and support environmental health.
Awesome. All right, we'll do a little finance today. One or two more? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Angela. I'm a joint degree between School of the Environment and School of Management. I'm here because I think the energy transition is a societal transformation that touches upon every single dimension of how we live. And I think also the way that we go about the transition is very important. It's not just about the outcome, but it's about how we get there and how we engage with all the different stakeholders involved. So that's why I'm here. And I'm excited to learn more about Posigen.
Please, one more and then we'll get into it.
Hi, I'm Allison. Whoa. I'm a master's student here at YC. I am particularly interested in how we can utilize unprecedented funding and policy work from like the Inflation Reduction Act to really support an equitable transition, and really curious how a for-profit company is tapping into those resources as well.
Love it. All right. Good rebuck, Kyle, for that. All right. So permission structure's open. More interruptions, raise your hand. Let's get involved. I know there's the weirdness online, whatever. You guys online just have to deal with the folks here. So why is this hard? Why is this hard? Even before that, just to the learning objectives that were just laid out. I'll say it this way. When I said I wanted to go back to school, and I told my then girlfriend, then became fiance while I was in school, now wife. And as I said, with 3 kids, one of whom is playing the worm game. What I wanted was, how do you think about public-private partnerships to mobilize capital to make a difference in the world? It's like public sectors, the revolution's not happening tomorrow, was what I said to her, right? It's like, we have a system we're going to try and make it better, but can we use capital to make a difference? And my grandmother, who helped raise me, was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party of the United States of America. And when I said to my dad, what do you think grandma would think about me going to business school? He said, she would say, controlling capital is important. So I said, okay, I'll go back to business school. And of course, I chose this business school, which is a different one than others, where people read the Times before the Wall Street Journal is what I still believe to be the case. But nonetheless, so why is this hard? This is hard because we have a set of regulatory systems and a capital structure that think about the solar industry. And I'm going to do solar as a microcosm, right? So we can talk about solar, but solar itself is not monolithic. Residential solar is different than commercial solar, is different than utility scale solar. It's different than wind. It's different than doing battery storage. It's different than doing energy, electric vehicles. Is different than energy efficiency. Each of these things, right? There's not just technology differences. How you think about the sub-market, the ecosystem of opportunity associated with them, the financing strategies to get them done, who pays, who wears the risk, right? Who's the tenant? Who's the owner? Who's the mortgage holder? Who's the auditor? Who's the contractor? Who's the insurance provider? Who's the reinsurance provider, right? Like each of these things, you can go down an ecosystem hole. And I encourage you to think about what we talk about today, just as here's a data point within residential solar that can be extrapolated across these different market sectors, but shouldn't be seen as, therefore, you are an expert in each of these. So residential solar, great example, though. And it's helpful because to open up these questions, because what you get with residential solar is a market that grew up fundamentally, as is case for so many things, designed for folks that could afford it first, didn't need financing. And then as you move into the world of financing, looks to the capital markets like consumer credit. Consumer credit meaning, I don't care that it's solar, right? To those that provide the capital, irrelevant. Theoretically, not irrelevant, right? They will tell you, we care very much. Does the solar work? Yes. Does it actually, do what it says it's going to do? Does it produce electrons? But they don't really care. What they care about is your FICO score originally 750 and above, and then 700 and above, and now down to 640 and above, but still fundamentally saying, I don't care if you guys are getting a refrigerator or a car or a solar system or something else. What I'm looking at is credit. And why does it work that way? It works that way because if you are moving massive amounts of money at a mutual fund, an investor, a pension advisor, whatever, what you're trying to do is not solve for what's the most creative thing I can do with my money, even if I'm motivated by ESG and other concerns and someone told me be more green. Right? At the end of the day, you're not really getting rewarded for that. You're getting rewarded for doing the deal that you know will perform. And the deal that you know will perform is the AAA rated security, unless it's the housing crisis, in which case it turns out everyone was wrong. It's the AAA rated security. Or you get a little bit more yield because you get the AA security, or a little more yield because you get the single A security. But either way, you're going through a process where an entire ecosystem of a rating agency and an auditor and everything else, right, is saying this is the box in which you can play. Add to that the complexity of important takeaway point number one for class on environmental justice from a finance guy's perspective. Our country makes social policy via the tax code. That is stupid and that is inefficient. And it benefits lawyers and accountants and banks and those with significant tax liabilities. But it doesn't actually help us efficiently get more clean energy onto the grid or onto people's homes or anything else that someone who might be motivated by mission, like Mr. Wallace, who spends a lot of time thinking about things like tax policy, actually care about. So you have the fundamental complexity of, or the fundamental challenge of a system built around FICO-based origination, credit score origination. And just to do one level more of Q&A, any thoughts from this crew on why FICO scores might or might not be a good indicator of payment history or payment repayment associated with solar? Everyone know what a FICO score is?
We don't have to have a microphone for this.
And you don't have to know this by any means. Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Why would a credit score be a good or bad indicator of whether or not you would repay a solar bill? All right, so there's a true, just substantive reason. What a credit score is good at telling you? Who knows? There's lots of things, and they are not unpredictive, even for Posigen. But you've got a substantive starting point, which is your credit score, if you're lower income, could be a lot lower just because you use a lot of your available credit, right? So, yes, go ahead. So core asymmetries of information around anything related to your credit score, for sure. But let's do two main categories. One being, there's all sorts of reasons where you get punished with bad credit for things that are actually not substantively reflective of your willingness or ability to repay, right? So one is, if I'm a wealthy person and I have $50,000 on my credit card line and I use $5,000 to $10,000 a month and pay it off, my credit score is 700. If I make my payments every month, but I'm someone who only has, because I'm low income, $3,000 or $4,000 of credit limit, and I'm using 2,000 of that a month, but I'm paying it every month, your credit score is 100 points lower just for that. Or you had a medical emergency, you couldn't pay for it, you have hospital debt, your credit score takes a hit. That's not something about your general ability to repay normal course things, right? But it's a commentary on how we structure credit in this country. That's sort of just substantively. Then there's the reality of your FICO score doesn't look at things like utility bill payments. And so now we're going to get to the core of Posigen. I'll stop my monologuing in a minute and hand it over to my colleagues. But the way to think about this important piece of the challenge and the opportunity of a company like Posigen is, we don't care about your FICO score, despite what the industry says about how you should finance these things, about a consumer credit profile, because every month we assume you're going to pay your cell phone bill first, you're going to pay your utility bill second, and then you're going to pay your house note and everything else. And so this construct of consumer credit is actually not applicable to the subspace. And again, we're talking about residential solar, and I'm thinking about the risks of whom we serve, of that population. That's challenge one. And then challenge two is the social policy nature of doing things through the tax code. So you both have to solve for, number one, can I convince people that this concept of FICO and credit score that they've been focused on actually doesn't matter nearly as much as it does, right? As they think it does, right? That the risk-adjusted pricing, right? What they would charge, right? The 20, 30% effective interest rate that they say, if I'm going to go down that low on the FICO chart, I'm going to have to charge here, right? No, that's the wrong way to do it. And do it through the lens of a scarce commodity, which is tax capacity, right? And I'm going to bring up a chart for this. Tax capacity to finance these projects. And the tax capacity is the nature of why we make, of how we make things so difficult. So let me go through that, and then we'll turn it over. So this, I'd ask for no screenshots. This is a live deck that I use to raise money on. And I'm gonna go all the way down to this, because this is the core value prop, right? That we're gonna say to everybody that we're asking for money, right? This is, and then I'm gonna have Susan do the version of, and we're gonna go into your scripts, how we actually talk to customers about it. But from the CFO's perspective, don't pay attention to FICO. Instead, someone's paying this much on their bill. Now they're paying this much. They have to pay us back a portion of that. They are better off every month. And while my new best friend Angela over there, might spend, who knows, however many dollars at Starbucks a month or the local cafe of your choice, and not notice it with the savings that she would receive, the family that is struggling to pay for their prescriptions and their groceries and their school supplies, that difference actually matters a great deal. So it's actually not a bad thing to be serving those, in this case, with lower income. In fact, it's an argument in favor of how important the Posigen bill is for them to pay, because by continuing to pay it, they're avoiding the much higher utility bill, right? No real rocket science of this. But here's now point number two about capital markets. So point number one is social policy via the tax code is how we do things in this country. Stupid, bad, inefficient makes things harder. We're going to look at some structures. Point number two is, I don't care how rational this seems. If you're your friendly neighborhood banker on Wall Street, you don't really care until you've seen thousands of data points around it. And so the other challenge of building a company like this is how do you start at a scale that's small enough that you can over time build year over year data, vintages, static pools of customers that you can say, oh yeah, look, here's my 400 and 500 and 600 and 700, 800 FICO customers. And yep, there are some differences in their payment performance. We can track them, it's true. The 800 FICOs pay better than the 400 FICOs, straight out. But turns out they all pay better than the guys that are of equal FICO score, whether you're looking at credit card debt or auto debt or anything else, because this is improving their monthly net income, right? They're better off paying the bill. And yes, it's a more vulnerable population. But so challenge number 2 for Posigen is over time, how do you build enough data? And this is why it's hard for anybody else to come on into this space to then convince all the financiers to do it. So that's point 2. I'm going to skip down to this slide to then say, yes. Yeah, when I say that, and whether or not vulnerable is the exact right word, let me not say that for sure, but in general, these are folks that whom we serve, where we're going into neighborhoods where no one else will, and where a life event, right, a death, a divorce, a job loss, what have you, will have a cascading effect on payments regardless, right? And that's not a question of willingness to pay, right? Whereas it's really about ability to pay in a moment. And so a lot of the construction of this company, therefore, in questions of authenticity are, if folks have trouble paying, do we have an ecosystem set up to support them over, how do you get back on track over what period of time? How do we think about our bill and what we're doing for that family? But it's an important point that if you're dealing with someone with lots of reserves, those bad things can happen that happen to all of us, and they'll still pay, right? Because it's just an auto debit that they won't even notice month over month, right? And so that is real additional risk just from serving whom we serve. And the question then is, how do you mitigate it? And what this chart on the bottom in particular shows, but when taken into account with the top, right, is the better we save people, the more likely we're going to be able to collect. And again, collecting in this world not being a bad thing, not being an evil thing, being the thing that says, yes, we can serve more folks because we're offsetting their higher utility bills. These families are doing better, and therefore they are making the choice to pay us. And there's lots of pieces that we could dive into more deeply here, but the fundamentals of Posigen is we don't put a lien on people's homes. If they don't pay us, we don't go and try and accelerate their lease payments and say, you owe us $20,000. We don't do a whole bunch of things that in the industry others do and or make folks look really bad. You only have to sort of follow the history of residential PACE in Southern California as an example of how to blow up a good-hearted attempt or a well-intentioned attempt to expand access, right? That was a particular approach to, we're going to take a higher level of security in somebody's home to get the investors comfortable. And instead, what they ended up doing was blowing up a whole business in Riverside County, right? Tens of thousands of homeowners. Instead,
a lot of startup issues around how did you get the tax credits, the homeowners. It was initially really not commercial clarity. A lot of
yeah, property assessed clean energy.
if it's time, using the value of property. There was a lot of work just even making that eligible for homeowners. It was initially with the commercial phase, and then the way they made it eligible had issues with a lot of things. Some of these things have been worked out, but
yeah, that's all well said, and it's mostly the commentary about anything related to PACE, right, versus how we operate our business is thinking about where you start in an ecosystem analysis. And what the folks who are building PACE were solving for was there's a financing challenge, right? And they solved it with a particular type of security mechanism. And what I love about Posigen, despite our very real other sets of challenges, are we solve for the customer piece first and then try and make the financing work around it. It makes my life a lot harder as the guy who is trying to attract the financing, but it means that the customer ends up better no matter what. And so before I get to the tax equity, which is what I'm going to do next and then hand it over, when I show you the chart of collections and when I say what we have to get investors comfortable and when I say my job is harder and when I say what does it look like to be authentic, if someone doesn't pay, Posigen is the only company in the country that will actually give them 6 months, try and work it through. At 3 months, we'll turn off the system, say, look, your utility bill is going up. What will it take us to help you turn it back on? At no point will we come after them and lien their home or try and do past due collections. Instead, what we'll do is we'll take the system off. The worst that happens to a Posigen homeowner is they are no worse off than they were before they started with us. That means more expense for us, but what it does, and now here's the key, it solves 2 problems, right? It solves a collections problem in that I don't have a consumer protection issue, and it solves a financing problem, although it solves it in an expensive way, because when I said social policy through the tax code, and it's stupid, so the ITC used to be 30% across the board, the investment tax credit, right? Helps buy down the cost of solar. Kyle's going to talk a little bit about how Uncle Ira, the Inflation Reduction Act, changes those dynamics, especially in the communities we serve. But what's a huge thing that someone who invests in tax credits care about? This idea called recapture. So for the tax credits to work historically, they and us have to co-own the project. Posigen doesn't have the tax liability. Why? Because it costs us thousands upon thousands of dollars to put a system on somebody's home, all of which are expenses. And we collect 70, 80, 90 bucks a month against that thousands of dollars we put in, right? So we don't have our own tax liabilities. We are not a federal income taxpayer. So we'll go out to a bank or a corporation or any fool that'll listen to our story who has tax liability and say, please provide this amount of capital. You effectively buy the tax credits, but you're not an arm's length purchaser. You own them with us. That's the way the tax code's structured. There are now abilities under IRA to sell those tax credits, important for those who are interested in the esoterics of where the market is going. But fundamentally, you own those projects, and regardless of whether you purchase them or you own them with us, you're subject to recapture. So if the system comes out of service, all that good tax liability that you just offset, you now owe that money back to the federal government. So you can imagine the investors who tend to do this, and this is not like, thousands or even, larger groups of institutions. There's a dozen, of which Bank of America and JP Morgan make up half the damn market, right? This is a concentrated market of folks that both have the tax liability and the sophistication to play in this stuff. They want to make sure that the systems are going to stay in service, or otherwise they've just blown up their tax portfolios. And why would they choose to do that with Posigen versus any of a number of safer things? Because as opposed to my friends here, they don't really care about the social benefit. They care about the return and coloring within the lines as they're supposed to. And so Posigen saying, if a customer defaults, that doesn't mean the system is written off. It doesn't mean we turn off the system. It doesn't mean tax recapture. We take that system off, we redeploy it. All of those things have to work together. And the financing here is only possible because we tell that story. But it only works if we don't screw our customers in the first place, right? If actually most of the time they're saving money, if when they're not, we try and fix it. And if they can't pay because something happens in their lives, we don't make their life worse. We just say, great, we're done. We're not coming after you. We take that back, we put it someplace else. And that's a huge challenge. So the last thing I'll say here is, and this is point 3. Point 1 was stupid social policy through the tax code. Point 2, right, was capital markets, conservative, designed to do the same thing they do over and over again. Nobody's really got incentives to do the hard things that you want to do. So you have to figure out how you start small, build data, continue to grow a portfolio that can actually prove out that this other thing that you thought was this risky is really only this risky, right? That's point 2. Point 3 is in the world of energy, and it might be true in any other EJ subject area that you're looking at, it's long-lived infrastructure we're talking about. So you have to think about both the developer, how do you finance that upfront, finding the customer, buying the equipment, getting through the permitting process, navigating the utilities that want to kill you, actually installing the thing, getting it turned on, right? That's the developer and the asset. Who owns the asset? What are their motivations? How do you take care of the asset? Make sure it's delivering, if you're Posigen, both energy, because we're an independent power producer, and that the customer actually understands what they're getting, especially our customer base. You're saving money. Utility bills went up in your neighborhood. That isn't because Posigen raised our prices. Okay, do you understand that? You're actually saving more now because those prices went up, but your overall utility spend is higher. You changed your behavior. Oh, when you plugged in that second refrigerator, that did something. Oh, when your family changed. Oh, when you did that thing to your house, right? All of these things are part of our asset co. And I frame this up because when you think about, and I'm happy to go specifics on this, but I'm gonna shut up now, right? When you think about the long life of the things that we're trying to do, that we're trying to deliver, we have to figure out how to solve for having enough cash up front to actually install the systems and have the life of the asset both serve the customer and continue to have dollars to make it all work. So I'll go into, if we have time, maybe after I turn it over to my colleagues, the sort of DevCo, AssetCo interrelationship and how that capital works together. I will quickly throw up, so it's a backdrop to Susan, so you can mull on it. A chart that would, which is the one I want to show you. Yes. Thank you. So I'll talk a little bit, if we have time at the end, about the complexity of what's behind you. But all of that, I think, is to lay the stage for Susan to talk a little bit after I've done the, all right, here's the structure, here's the major challenges we're solving from the financing and organizational perspective. Talk about, okay, but all this has to be simplified and made into a story that actually resonates with people. How we've done that well, where we've screwed up, because we certainly screwed up a lot, and it's hard to do it when you have no money, which for a long time was the case with this company. And so how you think about building something sort of from an innovation perspective and doing things that otherwise you couldn't. Turn that over to Susan, then maybe talk a little bit about recent policy developments that make things somewhat easier. So Susan, I turn it to you.
Okay, hello again, everyone. All righty, so where do I begin? I actually want to start something that Ben had mentioned about credit of families that we work with, the families that we serve. Many, I heard that someone had mentioned and says yes, because they don't understand credit. And that's a big issue with many families that we see, the communities that is dear to our heart. But one thing that really that has come to light, even with Posigen working with families in the local community, is that many of them sometimes they do, thanks to the utility companies, they do a payment plan. And so many of our families, because energy cost is so high and they're not able to afford it, and here comes the utility companies and say, oh, we're going to put you on a payment plan and you'll be fine. You just have to pay this little bit. But then that back sometimes gets reported back to the credit bureau, because then they're following and always having that back bill. So then they're not able to pay off what needs to be paid to keep their credit up. So then when the families again go through or try to go to, to do renewable energy, then the problem is that they don't have the FICO score, as Ben had mentioned, to continue on that. So then again, they're locked out of renewable energy. Just a little bit about my story and what Posigen does and our work in the community. So when I came to Posigen, actually about 9 years ago, I wanted to do renewable energy. I wanted to have solar panels. I'm like, this is the next best thing. And I have my chickens that I raise, for eggs. And I have a little vegetable garden, and this is it. Solar is the next best thing. But at that time, I was told I needed to put down 30 grand to go solar. And that just kind of really just got to me. I'm like, okay, then who's able? Is solar only for the rich? Is solar only able for a certain population? And then until Posigen and working with the Connecticut Green Bank came on board and making sure that we're saying, hey, solar is for everyone. Solar, I mean, renewable energy, it's a necessity. And how do we do that in the community? So for me, as the community impact manager, my role, which I mean, it's almost like it's it's natural because I've lived it, I've been there, is going out to the community and saying, okay, this is a program that we have. Many of the times we may have families say, okay, this sounds too good to be true. I mean, I've been turned down before by so many other companies. Oh, I don't meet that. And the difficulty is that for us with Posigen, we have to really build up trust. We have to peel back that layer of resentment and distrust that many of the families that need this help have been denied because they didn't meet that certain guideline that was imposed on them before. So what do we do when we're in the community? You know, what is our mission? What is our job? What is our role? Our bottom line is to make a positive impact on the lives of family. And I want to take that a little bit deeper. I want to say making a positive impact on the lives of everyday people. And that is it. It's not going into certain demographic and say, oh yes, this house is big and beautiful for solar, but it's for that little mom, that little pop, that whoever it is that, you know, sometimes you go into a home and you see that home, and as Ben had mentioned, the draft. You know, I mean, you go into a home and you say, well, this family, you know, their windows are not so good, you know, but, you know, you can't just go in and say, we're changing windows and we're changing all of this. But where do we start? With the company, Posigen, it's not just solar. And, you know, you could put 100 panels on your roof. If that home is not energy efficient, it's nothing. All that conditioned air, whether it's the cold air in the in the winter or you know or whatever, it's just going through out. So um we do have energy efficiency with solar. And for me and for all of us here and my colleagues, the big thing is sustainability, accessibility, and affordability. Those three have to work. Either of those out of sync, then we're really not doing anything. So even though solar, renewable energy has been around for ages, it was not affordable. It was not accessible. So now with the Solar for All program and being able to be even as a community impact manager, going through the community, I have to make sure I'm building trust, as I've mentioned, or let me not say building trust, I'm saying rebuilding trust, because so many of it has already been lost for families. My job is working with places of worship, nonprofits. And yes, we are a for-profit company. And I get that from time to time, and someone will say, you're a for-profit? We're a for-profit. But if you look at our pattern, we operate as a nonprofit. Oh, sorry. Can you skip it? I mean, oh, we can't. No, the method, it's not the norm of saying, okay, how much can we make? What can we do? And as Ben had mentioned, it's not, okay, what this customer, we really put our customers first. And what we do is saying what works for this family. Each family that we go and we meet with, we need to know, you know, we need to make sure that we're saving them money. And that's the bottom line. Families are, I mean, many of the families, sometimes it's not about renewable energy. You know, it's because they want to survive. Some of the families, it's, hey, will I be able to, you know, pay my bill this month, pay my mortgage, pay my rent? And these are the things that matters most. And we realize when I mentioned for-profit and nonprofit, sometimes those who are able to help, the big banks or whatever, they're not willing. And those who are not willing, sometimes smaller companies, but they're not able. So being able to bridge the gap and saying, okay, let's go in the community, let's identify let's identify different demographic that we know that we can reach out to who have been barred from solar. And let's make sure that we're able to reach those families. We do grassroots canvassing throughout the community. We do presentation of places of worship. We work for solar to work and for renewable energy to be promoted. It doesn't rain from top to bottom. It has to come from the top. So even for the Solar for All campaign, and we've done just about a dozen with municipalities throughout the state of Connecticut, and we're making sure we're working with the mayor's office. We're making sure we find, key players that are able to reach out to the families and work with them and being able to give the information that they need in order to succeed.
Dr. Young, before we pass it over to Kyle, just from sort of a sociological perspective, I guess I'd ask, when you think about what's effective in building trust and where you've been successful versus where we've fallen on our face, what would be, sort of the key lessons you'd pull out?
When it comes to building trust, it does take time. For the whole solar process, it can take a length of time from application to installation and activation and all of that. For families, they want to be able to communicate. They want to know exactly what the system entails. They want to be informed of the entire process. And in building trust, we want to make sure that we are hearing what our families or those who are interested in renewable energy, what they need, and making sure that we're reaching out to them on that basis.
Great.
Okay.
All right, we'll bring you back up.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
You talk about who owns solar systems for the sake of the project. What does the ownership mean in the project?
Sure. I'll do those really quick. So a key part to question one, a key part of the Posigen business model, which is reflected in this crazy spider web, is we own the systems, start to finish. A customer has the right, if they choose, to purchase post the tax credit recapture period and buy it themselves. But the reason it's important we own it is because often the folks we serve don't have the tax liabilities. And so therefore we monetize it through the crazy structure and pass that through in a lower cost lease. There's all sorts of back and forth in residential solar about loans versus leases, different ways of financing. The approach that Posigen does prioritizes consumer protection because the financing, the lease obligation doesn't kick in until the customer starts to receive the benefit. And because we think like a long-term owner, we do the O&M, we take all of that long-term operational concern off the customer. And it's a product feature, as it were, that we think is very important for whom we serve. And it's also key to the financing strategy. Then to the second question, which was, remind me. Oh, transfer. Yeah. 90% of the time, 95% of the time, someone selling their home, new homeowner will take on the lease. There should be no issue. They should be aware they're saving money. Old people saving money, new people saving money. This is a question we get a ton in diligence from our investors, for sure. There's 2 points that matter here. One is that in fact, the folks in the demographic we serve move a lot less than the general population, which might seem counterintuitive. Keep in mind that for Posigen's customer base, these are not renters, these are homeowners. So again, you got to think about where in the strata you are and what the asset is. But because these are often inherited generational homes or the means aren't there for moving, it actually advantages us from a value proposition. And then the other point associated with it is in the rare case where someone wants to move in, but not take on the lease can be bought down at that point. And there's a variety of ways. And as with everything else, and we don't advertise this, if there's an impasse, we're not going to stop grandma from selling her house because the new people don't want to take on the lease. We will take it off, right? It goes on that list of, here's just how we operate. We don't like to say that too loudly because we want them to take the lease. Okay, thank you for those joining online. And appreciate everyone tuning in. Happy to take more questions offline for sure. If you want to stick around, I don't know if you're even allowed to. I'm assuming you're not allowed to, but we'll send out Kyle's presentation on the policy side, and then we'll have some fun with the scripts with everyone in the room next.